Château de Lumière, October 14th. The orchestra plays a waltz, but the air smells like impending ruin. I am Rachel Wilson, and I am the ghost at my brother's feast. My mother thinks I'm miles away crying in my cramped apartment, but I'm standing at the edge of the dance floor, in a dress the color of a warning sign. They spent $100,000 on this perfect night, every penny of it stolen from the settlement, meant to fix my shattered bones. The champagne is cold, the smiles are bright, and I'm about to walk into the spotlight to burn their reputation to the ground. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. I stared at the textured drywall of my apartment ceiling, trying to ignore the sound of my upstairs neighbor walking in what sounded like lead boots. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. My feet were throbbing a dull, rhythmic ache that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I had just finished a double shift on my feet, and the smell of stale coffee and sanitizer was still clinging to my hair. This was my life grind sleep repeat. I was 28 years old, and I was exhausted. I rolled over on my lumpy mattress, the springs groaning in protest, and grabbed my phone. It was a reflex, a bad habit I couldn't break. I opened Instagram, and there it was, right at the top of the feed. The brightness of the screen stung my tired eyes, but I couldn't look away. It was a photo of my brother Jake and his fiancée Lily. They were standing on a manicured lawn, the kind that looks like it's been cut with nail scissors, holding champagne flutes. The location tag read, Château de Lumière, one of the most exclusive vineyard venues in the state. The caption was full of heart emojis and hashtags about forever and blessed. They looked perfect, shiny, expensive. I looked down at my own hand holding the phone. My fingernails were short and unpolished, the skin around my cuticles dry from washing my hands 50 times a day. We were blood relatives sharing the same DNA, but looking at that photo, we might as well have been different species. Then a notification banner dropped down from the top of the screen. A text message. It was from Mom. My stomach tightened. It was that Pavlovian response I had developed over the last decade. Whenever my mother texted, I braced for impact. I opened it. Rachel, sweetie, we really want a peaceful, drama-free wedding. It's better if you don't come. I read it twice. The words were polite, wrapped in that sugary sweetie she used when she was delivering a knife to the gut, but the message was clear. I wasn't invited. I wasn't shocked, not really. I scrolled up to see the last interaction we'd had, which was weeks ago, just me asking if they were free for a call that they never returned. I switched over to the family group chat, a thread I was technically still a part of but rarely posted in. It was buzzing. A stream of photos, flower arrangements, table settings, links to a live band's demo reel. My aunt was commenting on how divine the appetizers looked. My dad posted a thumbs up. No one mentioned me. No one asked, "Hey, where's Rachel?" I was the ghost of the Wilson family. Present but invisible. Unwanted. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. I didn't cry. I think I had burned out my tear ducts years ago. Instead, I just felt a cold, heavy stone settle in my stomach. I got up and walked to the kitchenette, opening the fridge to find nothing but a carton of almond milk and half a takeout container of pasta. I wasn't always this person. I wasn't always the failure living paycheck to paycheck in a sketchy apartment complex where the cops showed up every other weekend. I grew up in a house with a 2-story foyer and a lawn service. I took piano lessons. I was a white American girl from the suburbs who did everything right. I got good grades. I didn't get pregnant in high school. I didn't get arrested. But somewhere along the line, the script flipped. Now I was drowning in student loans, rent that ate up 60% of my income, and the lingering medical debt from the accident that changed everything. That accident. It was the only time in my life I thought something good might finally happen for me. That sounds morbid, I know. But when you're desperate, even a tragedy looks like an opportunity if there's a payout at the end of it. To understand why my mother uninviting me from my brother's wedding didn't make me scream, you have to understand the Wilsons. We were the picture-perfect American family. My dad was a self-made man, a blue-collar guy who worked his way up to owning a successful contracting business. He was obsessed with reputation. To him, respectability was a currency more valuable than gold. My mom was his perfect partner in crime, PTA, President Church Committee Chair, the woman who baked cookies for every fundraiser and made sure our Christmas card photo was color coordinated. And then there was Jake, my big brother, the golden boy. Jake was the varsity quarterback. Jake was the one who got the slap on the back when he got a C in math because he's focused on the game. Jake was the future of the family name, and me, I was Rachel. Smart, quiet, creative, and entirely inconvenient. I didn't fit the brand. If Jake broke a neighbor's window with a baseball, it was, boys will be boys. If I pointed out that Dad was being unfair, or that Mom was more concerned with what the neighbors thought than how I felt, I was labeled difficult. That was their favorite word for me. Difficult, sensitive, dramatic. I learned early on that my role in the family was to be the audience for Jake's success and the shock absorber for my parents' anxieties. But the dynamic shifted permanently when I was 20. I was home from college for the summer, driving back from a late shift at a bookstore. I had the green light. The other driver didn't. He was doing 60 in a 35 drunk out of his mind. I don't remember the impact. I just remember waking up in the ICU with a shattered pelvis, a broken femur, and a concussion that made the world spin for months. The recovery was brutal. I lost a year of school. I had to learn to walk again. But because the other driver was wealthy and clearly at fault, there was a settlement. A big one. My lawyer, a nice woman who seemed genuinely horrified by my x-rays, told me the sum would be enough to set me up for life. It was meant to cover my future medical bills because, let's be honest, you don't break that many bones without having arthritis by 30, my education, and a down payment on a house. It was my ticket out. It was freedom. But I was 20 years old, doped up on painkillers, and lying in a hospital bed with my parents hovering over me. They told me I wasn't in the right state of mind to handle that kind of money. They said there were predators out there. They said they needed to protect me. "We'll set up a structured trust, Rachel," my dad had said, holding my hand, his eyes wet with tears. It was one of the few times he'd ever shown me physical affection. "Mom and I will be co-trustees. We'll just watch over it. You can access it for your health, your education, your maintenance. It's for your future." I trusted them. Why wouldn't I? They were my parents. They had spent weeks sleeping in chairs next to my hospital bed. I thought the accident had finally made them see me. I thought it had scared them into loving me the way they loved Jake. So I signed. I signed the document that gave them control over the distribution of funds. The language was standard. The money was for the health, education, maintenance, and support of the beneficiary. Me. For the next 8 years, I barely touched it. I took out student loans for the rest of my degree because my dad said, "It builds character to have skin in the game, Rachel. Save the trust for a house." I worked double shifts. I drove a beat-up sedan. When I needed therapy for the PTSD after the crash, I paid out of pocket until I couldn't afford it anymore. Then I just stopped going. I was trying to prove to them that I was responsible. I was trying to earn the right to my own safety net. Fast forward to a few months ago. The wedding talk started. Jake proposed to Lily, a girl who looked like she was manufactured in a factory for perfect wives. My parents were ecstatic. But every time I talked to them, the conversation turned to how tight things were. "Business is slow this quarter," Dad would say, sighing heavily into the phone. "We'd love to help you with that dental bill, sweetie, but we're just stretched so thin with the economy," Mom would add. I believed them. I felt guilty for even asking. I figured they were saving every penny to retire. But then the wedding planning went into hyperdrive. I started seeing the posts. Lily's dress wasn't off the rack. It was a custom designer gown that easily cost 5 figures. The venue wasn't the local country club. It was a destination resort that required a full weekend buyout. They were hiring a 10-piece live band. They were flying in a specialist florist. The cognitive dissonance was making me dizzy. How could they be stretched thin And yet throwing a wedding that cost more than the house I grew up in, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Lily's parents were rich. Maybe Jake had made a killing in crypto. Maybe they took out a second mortgage. I forced myself to stop thinking about it. It wasn't my business. I was just the difficult sister, the one who wasn't invited because she might bring drama. I stood in my kitchen eating cold pasta straight from the container, staring at the text message again. It's better if you don't come. Fine. I wouldn't go. I'd save the money on the dress and the gift. I'd work an extra shift. I'd stay in my lane just like always. I sat down at my wobbly IKEA desk to check my email before bed. I needed to see if my utility bill had cleared. I opened my inbox and started deleting the usual junk newsletters. I never read ads for credit cards I wouldn't qualify for. Then I saw it. It was an email from the financial institution that held my trust. The subject line was dry and bureaucratic distribution confirmation, Wilson Recovery Trust. I frowned. I hadn't requested a distribution. I hadn't asked for a dime in over 2 years, not since I needed a deposit for this apartment. I assumed it was a system error or maybe a quarterly statement. I almost deleted it. But something, maybe that little voice in the back of my head that had been screaming for years, made me click. The email wasn't a statement. It was a notification of a withdrawal, a large one. Amount $125,000. Authorization trustee. Joint approval. James Wilson, Linda Wilson. Memo family event. Support. My heart stopped. I mean that literally. For a second my chest was just an empty void. I stared at the number. $125,000. That was more money than I made in 3 years. I looked at the date. The transfer had been initiated 3 days ago. My hands started to shake. I clicked on the attachment, a PDF of the transaction receipt. There it was in black and white. My parents' signatures at the bottom. The memo line was typed out in my mother's handwriting font. Family event. Support. I felt bile rise in my throat. I tabbed back to Instagram on my phone. I found the post from 3 days ago, the day the money moved. It was a video of my mother and Lily clinking glasses at the venue. The caption read, "So happy to finally secure the dream package for our kids. Paid in full. God is good." The timeline locked into place like the tumblers of a safe. The tight money, the complaints about the economy, the refusal to help me with my medical bills, and the peaceful, drama-free wedding they didn't want me to attend. Of course they didn't want me there. It's hard to enjoy the champagne when the person who paid for it is standing in the corner wearing a dress from Ross. I sat there in the dark, the blue light of the laptop illuminating my face. The exhaustion was gone. The sadness was gone. In its place was something cold and sharp, something I hadn't let myself feel since I was 20 years old. They hadn't just uninvited me, they had looted me. They took the money that was supposed to fix my broken body and used it to throw a party for the son who had never broken a bone in his life. I looked at the text from my mother again. "It's better if you don't come." I laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound in the empty apartment. That was the moment I realized my brother's fairy tale wedding might be built on my broken bones. And if they thought I was going to stay home and be peaceful while they danced on my grave, they had severely underestimated the daughter they spent a lifetime ignoring. I didn't sleep. I spent the night staring at the ceiling fan, watching the blades slice through the stale air of my apartment, dissecting every financial interaction I'd had with my parents over the last 8 years. By the time the sun bled through my cheap blinds, I had a plan. It wasn't a good plan, but it was a start. I called in sick to work something I never did, and waited until exactly 9:00 a.m. to dial the number for the trust management firm. I didn't ask for the manager. I asked for the junior associate listed on the bottom of the email, a guy named David, who I hoped would be less guarded than the senior partners. When he answered, I put on my best, confused but compliant daughter voice. "Hi, David. This is Rachel Wilson. I was just looking at the recent notification, and I'm so sorry to bother you, but I think my records are out of sync. I just wanted to update my own spreadsheet to match yours. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Oh, Ms. Wilson, yes, of course. The distribution from Tuesday. Right, I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My parents mentioned they were moving some funds around for family stability, but I just wanted to clarify the exact categorization. For tax purposes, you know. Right, let's see here. More typing. Yes, James and Linda authorized it under the General Welfare and Family Maintenance Clause. The notation here says, Beneficiary Support and Unifying Event. Unifying Event. They had categorized Jake's wedding as a service to me. I see, I said, keeping my voice steady. And David, while I have you, could you just send me the full ledger from the last 5 years? I feel like I've been so hands-off, I should probably be more responsible. Sure thing. Sending it now. The email pinged before we even hung up. I thanked him, hung up, and opened the attachment. If the single notification the night before had been a slap in the face, this document was a firing squad. It wasn't just the wedding. I scrolled down the list, matching dates to memories. August 2021, $14,000. Withdrawal. Vehicle purchase. That was the month Jake got his new truck. I remembered because I was driving a sedan with a driver's side door that didn't open from the outside, and my dad had told me, "We can't help you with a new car right now, Rachel. You need to learn to make do." January 2022, $8,500. Withdrawal. Professional development. That was Jake's executive coaching program he took when he didn't get promoted. That same month, I had asked my parents for help paying for a specialized physical therapy round because my hip was locking up in the cold. They told me to try yoga because insurance premiums are killing us. They had been bleeding me dry, drop by drop, month by month. They had turned my trauma settlement into a slush fund for Jake's life. I sat there, the glow of the screen illuminating the dust motes dancing in my apartment, and I calculated the total. It wasn't just the wedding money. Over the years, they had taken nearly 60% of the trust. That money could have wiped out my student loans. It could have paid for the therapy I desperately needed to stop waking up screaming from nightmares of shattering glass. It could have moved me out of this neighborhood where I carried pepper spray just to walk to my mailbox. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was moral. I grew up listening to my father preach about the sanctity of hard work. You eat what you kill, he'd say. Handouts make you weak. Yet here he was, cannibalizing his daughter's future to subsidize his son's present. They had punished me for needing things while they stole the very resources I possessed to provide for myself. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry. The sadness had calcified into something harder, something that felt a lot like rage. I grabbed my keys. I was going home. The drive to the suburbs usually took 45 minutes, but I made it in 30. I pulled up to the house with the manicured lawn and the American flag waving lazily by the porch. It looked so perfect, so respectable. It was the kind of house that whispered, "Good people live here." My dad's truck was in the driveway. Mom's SUV was next to it. I didn't knock. I still had a key, a symbolic gesture they hadn't bothered to revoke. I walked in, and the smell hit me: lemon polish and pot roast, the scent of my childhood. They were in the kitchen. Mom was arranging flowers in a vase. Dad was reading something on his tablet. They looked up, startled. "Rachel," Mom said, her smile faltering. "We didn't know you were coming. Is everything okay?" I didn't answer. I walked over to the kitchen island, the granite cold under my fingertips, and placed my laptop down. I opened it and spun it around so the spreadsheet was facing them. "I know," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. Dad looked at the screen, then at me. His face hardened instantly. The defensive crouch. "What is this?" "It's the ledger, Dad. It's the history of you stealing my settlement money." "Watch your tone," he snapped, standing up. "Nobody stole anything. That trust is family money." "It is not family money." I slammed my hand on the counter, the sound making Mom jump. It was an insurance settlement for my accident, for my broken pelvis, for the year I lost. And who took care of you that year? Mom interjected, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. Who bathed you? Who drove you to every appointment? Who fed you? We gave up our lives for you, Rachel. We sacrificed everything when you were hurt. So that makes it okay to take 6 figures to pay for a party? I asked, pointing at the screen. You authorized $125,000 for a wedding I'm not even invited to. It's for the family, Dad yelled. Jake is the future of this family. This wedding is important for his career, for our standing in the community. We are investing in the family's stability. When Jake does well, we all do well. I don't do well, Dad. I can barely pay rent. I have student loans collecting interest, while you're buying custom floral arches with my money. You have loans because you insisted on that arts degree. He scoffed, crossing his arms. If you'd done something practical, you wouldn't be struggling. Don't blame us for your poor choices. We managed that money to protect you from blowing it all on nonsense. And now look at you coming in here accusing your own parents of theft. You're ungrateful. That's what you are. The gaslighting was so practiced, so seamless. For a second I almost felt guilty. Almost. But then I looked at the ledger again. Is Jake coming? I asked. Leave your brother out of this, Mom said quickly. He has enough stress with the wedding. Does he know? I looked at them. Does he know he's driving a truck paid for by the sister he ignores? The back door opened then, and Jake walked in. He was wearing gym clothes, looking fit and tanned and golden. He stopped when he saw the tension in the room. Whoa, he said, holding up a protein shake. What's going on? Your sister is having one of her episodes, Dad said dismissively. I turned to Jake. I'm not having an episode. I found out Mom and Dad emptied my injury trust to pay for your wedding, and your truck, and your life coach. Jake blinked. He looked at Dad, then at me. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, guilt, surprise. It was hard to tell. Wait, the settlement money, I thought. Dad said that was an investment fund he set up. It was an investment fund, Dad said. Invested in us. In you. Jake looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight. Rach, look, I didn't know it was specifically that. But it's already spent, right? The deposits are down. We can't exactly get it back. You could cancel the live band, I said. You could scale back. You could pay me back. Jake let out a short, nervous laugh. Rach, come on. We're 2 weeks out. Lily would kill me. We can't change the plans now. It's just money. You're doing okay, aren't you? You've got your job. It's just money. I looked at the three of them, the triangle of justification. They had built a reality where I was the resource to be mined, and they were the rightful owners. I want it back, I said. I want you to restore the trust, at least the wedding money, by Friday. Dad laughed. It was a mean, barking sound. Or what, you'll ground us. Or I'll get a lawyer, and I'll tell everyone. The room went dead silent. The air pressure dropped. You wouldn't, Mom whispered. You'd sue your own parents over money that is sick, Rachel. That is absolutely sick. If you make this ugly. Dad stepped closer, using his height to intimidate me. You are dead to us. You understand. You drag this family's name through the mud, and you are done. I think I was done the minute you decided my future mattered less than Jake's centerpieces, I said. I grabbed my laptop. Friday. I walked out. My legs were shaking so bad I had to sit in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive. I didn't wait for Friday to start the next phase. I drove straight to a cafe and started Googling lawyers. I found a woman who specialized in probate and trust litigation. She had a kind face on her website and a shark's resume. I managed to get a consultation for the next afternoon, but that night, the texts started coming. From Mom. If you are going to be this vindictive, please do not come to the wedding. We cannot have your negative energy ruining Jake's day. We need a peaceful, drama-free environment. From Jake, Rach, please don't ruin this for Lily. She's stressed enough. We can talk about money later. Okay, just let us have this. From Dad. Radio silence. I sat in my apartment surrounded by the silence of my negative energy. I felt like I was being torn in two. On one side, there was the American cultural script I'd been force-fed since birth. Family comes first. Forgive and move on. Don't air dirty laundry. Be the bigger person. On the other side was a new terrifying voice. No one is coming to save you. I went to the lawyer the next day. She was sharp professional and she didn't look at me like I was crazy. She looked at the trust documents, the ledger, and the emails. You have a case, she said, leaning back in her chair. A strong one. Breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, self-dealing. It's textbook. I felt a rush of relief. So we can stop them. We can sue them, she corrected. But Rachel, you need to know what that looks like. It will be expensive. It will take months, maybe years. And since they are your parents, they will likely try to argue that the distributions were for your benefit in abstract ways, family unity, housing stability if you ever stayed there. It gets messy, and once we file, it's public record. I don't care about public record, I said. They will, she noted. But you have to be prepared for them to fight dirty. If they are as concerned with reputation as you say, they might scorch the earth before they write you a check. I left her office with a retainer agreement I couldn't afford to sign yet. I walked to my car feeling the weight of the impasse. Legal action was the nuclear option. It was the right thing to do, but it wouldn't stop the wedding. It wouldn't stop them from standing up in front of 200 people next week and playing the role of the benevolent, successful parents. They would still get their applause. They would still get their photos. And I would be the bitter sister suing from the sidelines. I went home and started gathering my receipts. If I was going to war, I needed ammunition. I printed the bank statements. I saved the text messages where Mom uninvited me. I found the old emails where I had asked for help with medical bills, and they had pleaded poverty. I needed to talk to someone. I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I called my Aunt Sarah. She was Dad's younger sister, the black sheep, because she moved to the city and married an artist. We rarely spoke, but she had always been kind to me. Aunt Sarah, I asked when she picked up, I need to ask you something crazy. I told her everything. I read her the numbers. I told her about the uninvite. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she sighed a heavy, weary sound. Oh, honey, I always wondered how they were paying for all that. Your dad has been leveraging the business for years. I suspected they were broke, but I didn't think they'd eat their young. They said I'm being dramatic, I said, my voice cracking. You're not being dramatic, Rachel. You're being robbed. And honestly, they've always favored Jake. It's been the family joke for 20 years, but nobody thought it was this bad. Hearing her say it, hearing another adult confirm that I wasn't insane was like oxygen. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't difficult. I was a victim of a long con. Friday came and went. No check, no apology. Just a social media post from my mother. I was scrolling before bed, a masochistic habit, when I saw it. A picture of Mom and Dad holding hands, looking wistfully at the sunset. The caption read, "Parenting is about sacrifice. We have given everything we have to ensure our children's happiness. Watching our son start his new life is worth every penny, every struggle, every sleepless night. Family is everything." Blessed. Wedding countdown. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet, like a wire being cut. Sacrifice. They were claiming my sacrifice as their own. They were building their sainthood on my suffering. They were going to stand up at that wedding toast to their own generosity and bask in the adoration of their friends, all while I sat in the dark, erasing myself to keep their secret. No, I wasn't going to sue them. Not yet. That was too sterile, too quiet. They wanted a drama-free wedding. They wanted everyone to see what a perfect family they were. Fine. I would give them exactly what they paid for. I would give them the truth. I opened a new tab on my browser. I searched for the wedding registry to confirm the dress code, black tie optional. I checked my bank account. I had barely enough for rent, but I had a credit card with a $500 limit I kept for emergencies. This was an emergency. I went online to a department store site and found a dress. It was simple, elegant, and dark red, the color of a warning sign. I paid for expedited shipping. Then I opened my calendar. The date of the wedding was circled in red. I didn't mark it as Jake's wedding. I deleted that event. I created a new one. The audit. I wasn't going as a guest. I wasn't going as a sister. I was going as the only person in that zip code who knew where the bodies were buried. And I was going to bring the shovel. The drive up to the Château de Lumière was a winding ascent through manicured vineyards that seemed to stretch on forever. I sat in the back of a rideshare, a Toyota Camry that smelled faintly of pine air freshener, watching the world get more expensive with every mile. My driver, a quiet man named Sam, had whistled when we passed the stone gates. "Fancy," he'd said. I didn't reply. I was too busy trying to keep my breathing even. I was wearing the dark red dress I'd bought online. It fit perfectly, hugging my frame in a way that felt like armor. I had done my hair and makeup with surgical precision. If I was going to execute this, I had to look like I belonged there. I had to look like a Wilson. We pulled up to the valet stand. It was a scene straight out of a bridal magazine. String lights cascaded from the ancient oaks like falling stars. A string quartet was playing something classical and airy near the entrance. Guests were milling about holding crystal flutes of champagne, the women in floor-length gowns and the men in sharp tuxedos. It was beautiful. It was breathtaking. And every single inch of it, from the imported orchids to the gravel under my heels, was paid for with the settlement from the worst year of my life. I stepped out of the car, thanking Sam, and smoothed the fabric of my dress. I felt like an intruder in a kingdom I had unknowingly funded. I walked past the welcome sign. It was a rustic, chic chalkboard masterpiece in calligraphy. "Welcome to the Wilsons' new chapter." Below it was a collage of photos on a wooden pallet wall. I paused to look. There were photos of Jake and Lily, obviously. Photos of my parents looking young and vibrant. Photos of Jake as a baby. Jake at graduation. Jake winning a football trophy. There was even a picture of the family golden retriever that died 5 years ago. I scanned the entire wall. I wasn't there, not in a single frame. They had curated the visual history of the family, and I had been edited out completely. It was as if I had never existed. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to erase me while they spent it. A cold, sharp shiver went down my spine, unrelated to the evening breeze. This was the Mr. Ballin vibe I always listened to on YouTube, the ordinary setting that feels perfectly normal until you notice the one detail that makes your skin crawl. For everyone else, this was a celebration. For me, it was a crime scene. I moved into the courtyard. The reception was being held outdoors under a massive tent with open sides. I kept my head high, grabbing a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray just to have something to do with my hands. "Rachel." I turned. It was my cousin Mike, my dad's nephew. He looked genuinely shocked, his eyebrows disappearing into his hairline. "Whoa, I didn't think you were coming." "Why wouldn't I come, Mike? It's my brother's wedding." He shuffled his feet, looking awkward. "Well, yeah, but Aunt Linda said you were pulled away for work. Said you were working some big double shift and couldn't get out of it. She said you were really torn up about it, but, duty calls." "Is that what she said?" I took a sip of water. The bubbles burned my throat. "Yeah, and she mentioned things have been tense, that you were going through some personal stuff, withdrawing a bit." He looked at me with pity. "I'm glad you made it, though. You look great." "Thanks, Mike." I walked away before he could say more. So that was the narrative. I wasn't just uninvited. I was painted as the workaholic distant sister who couldn't prioritize family. They had covered their tracks perfectly. If I hadn't shown up, everyone would have just pitied my parents for having such an uninvolved daughter. Poor Linda and James doing so much for everyone, and Rachel can't even show up. I moved deeper into the crowd. I saw my Aunt Sarah near the bar. She did a double take when she saw me, giving me a small, grim nod. She knew. She was the only one in this sea of 200 people who knew the ground was about to open up. Then I saw them. My dad was standing near the head table laughing at something the father of the bride was saying. He looked the part of the patriarch, perfectly tan, silver-haired, radiating success. Mom was next to him in a shimmering navy gown, touching his arm. They looked relieved, happy, safe. Then Dad's eyes swept the crowd. He was scanning the room, likely counting the important guests, checking the optics. His gaze slid over me, moved past, and then snapped back. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a physical blow. He froze. He said something to my mother and her head whipped around. Her hand flew to her mouth. For a second, just a second, I saw pure, unadulterated fear. Not annoyance. Fear. They knew exactly what they had done, and they knew exactly what I was capable of if I decided to stop playing by their rules. Dad said something brief to the people around him, probably an excuse, and started walking toward me. He moved with a stiff, predatory speed, grabbing Mom's elbow and pulling her along. He didn't walk through the center. He flanked the crowd, trying to herd me away from the main group near the dance floor. I didn't run. I stood my ground near a large floral installation by the fountain. It was slightly set apart, but still visible to anyone looking that way. They reached me. Dad was breathless, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Hello, Dad. Mom. Lovely venue." "We told you not to come," Mom whispered, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching. "We told you we needed a peaceful day." "And I wanted a peaceful life," I said calmly. "But you bought this peaceful day with my trust fund." "Lower your voice." Dad stepped into my personal space, looming over me. "You are trespassing. If you don't leave right now, I will have security drag you out." "Go ahead," I challenged him. "Make a scene. I thought you wanted no drama. Dragging your daughter out by her hair seems pretty dramatic." "You are being selfish," Mom spat, tears of rage welling in her eyes. "This is Jake's moment. Why do you have to ruin everything? Why do you have to be so… me?" I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I'm not the one who committed fraud, Mom. I'm just here to see what $125,000 of my medical settlement looks like in flower form. It's very impressive. Did you use the money for my physical therapy to pay for the open bar, or was that the down payment on the band?" "Shut up," Dad snarled. "That was family money, you ungrateful little… It was my money." I raised my voice just enough to carry over the ambient chatter. A few heads turned nearby. "My broken bones paid for your reputation, Dad. My pain paid for your photo ops." "I said shut your mouth," he snapped. The veneer of the respectable businessman cracked, and the anger he'd been suppressing for years, the anger that his daughter wouldn't just be quiet and compliant, exploded. He swung his hand. The slap was loud. It sounded like a gunshot in the open air. His palm connected with my cheek with enough force to snap my head to the side. My ear rang. I stumbled back a step, catching myself on the stone rim of the fountain. The reaction was instant. The chatter in the immediate area died. A woman gasped audibly. Someone dropped a glass, the shatter of crystal on stone punctuating the silence. I slowly turned my head back to face him. My cheek was burning, throbbing in time with my heart. Dad was staring at his own hand, looking horrified, as if he hadn't meant to do it. But he had. He had meant to silence me the only way he knew how. Mom looked frozen. She's hysterical," she stammered to the people staring. She has issues." That was the point of no return. They had just publicly confirmed the ugliness they had kept hidden behind manicured lawns and Christmas cards for decades. I touched my cheek. It was hot. I looked at my father. He looked smaller now, shrinking under the collective gaze of his peers. "Thank you," I said softly. "You just made this a lot easier." I turned away from them. I didn't run to the bathroom to cry. I didn't flee to the parking lot. I walked straight toward the bandstand. The guests parted for me. They were confused, whispering, watching the girl in the red dress with the bright red mark on her face walk with terrifying purpose. The band was taking a break and the lead singer had left the microphone on the stand. I stepped up onto the small riser. The feedback squealed for a second, a high-pitched whine that made everyone wince and look up. The entire wedding party who had been taking photos near the vineyard edge turned around. Jake was there. Lily was there. They looked confused. I grabbed the mic. My hand wasn't shaking. I was in the eye of the storm now. "Hi, everyone," I said. My voice boomed through the high-quality speakers my money had rented. "I'm Rachel Wilson, Jake's sister. I know I'm not on the photo wall and I wasn't on the guest list, but I think I've paid enough to say a few words." "Cut the mic," I heard my dad screaming from the back. "Cut it." But the sound guy was confused, looking between me and my dad, freezing up. I kept talking. "Most of you know my parents, James and Linda. You know them as generous, successful people. You know they sacrificed everything to give their son this beautiful wedding." I paused. I saw my mother trying to push through the crowd, but she was being blocked by the density of the guests. 8 years ago, I was in a car accident. I continued, my voice steady, conversational, almost like I was telling a campfire story. I was crushed by a drunk driver. I broke my pelvis. I broke my femur. I had to learn to walk again. I received a legal settlement, money meant for my medical care, my future, my survival. My parents insisted on managing it for me, to protect me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I locked eyes with Jake across the lawn. He looked pale. For years they told me money was tight. They couldn't help me with therapy. They couldn't help me when I was struggling to pay rent, but they weren't broke. They were just spending my settlement. They used my pain money to buy Jake's truck. They used it for his life coach. And 3 weeks ago they withdrew the remaining $125,000 to pay for this. I gestured wide to the venue. The flowers, the wine, the band. This entire fairy tale is built on a theft. It is built on the money that was supposed to fix my broken body. "She's lying," Mom shrieked. She had finally broken through the front line. "She's mentally unstable. Don't listen to her." "I have the bank statements," I said, pulling my phone out and holding it up. "I have the emails from the trust officer. I have the wire transfer receipts authorized by James and Linda Wilson for family event. If anyone wants to see the paper trail of how the Wilsons really do business, find me after the toast. I'm happy to airdrop it." I looked down at my parents. They were ruined. I could see it in their faces. They weren't just embarrassed. They were exposed. The mask had slipped, and underneath the suburban perfection was just greed and rot. Then I turned to the head table, to the golden boy. "Jake," I said. The name hung in the air. He stepped forward, looking like he was going to be sick. Lily was standing next to him, her hand covering her mouth, looking from me to her new in-laws with dawning horror. "Did you know?" I asked him. Simple, direct. "Did you know your dream wedding was paid for with the money that was supposed to pay for your sister's recovery?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. Jake looked at Dad. He looked for a lifeline, for an explanation, for the usual reassurance that everything was handled. But Dad was just staring at the ground, defeated. Jake looked back at me. His eyes were wide, wet, and terrified. Dad told me it was an investment. He said what?" I pressed. "He said it was family money," Jake whispered, but the mic picked it up. "It wasn't," I said. "It was mine." Jake looked at his new wife. Lily took a step away from him. A small step, but it was a chasm. She looked at the opulent decorations around her, and I could see the realization hitting her. She was standing in the middle of a crime scene, too. The crowd erupted. It wasn't a cheer. It was a chaotic mix of whispers, gasps, and angry murmurs. People were turning on my parents. I saw a business associate of my dad's shake his head and walk away. I saw my Aunt Sarah stepping forward, glaring at her brother. My father tried to salvage it. He lunged for the stage, his face purple. This is private. You are ruining this family, you ungrateful. But he didn't make it to me. My cousin Mike, the one I'd met at the entrance, stepped in front of him. He put a hand on Dad's chest. Uncle James, stop, Mike said. His voice was firm. Just stop. You hit her. We all saw it. It's over. The venue staff was moving in now. A manager in a headset was approaching me looking terrified of a lawsuit, but also concerned. Ma'am, he said softly, are you okay? Do you want us to call the police? I looked at the chaos I had caused. The wedding was shattered. The perfect image was dead. My cheek throbbed, but for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt light. No, I said into the mic before placing it gently back on the stand. I don't need the police. I just wanted the truth on the record. I stepped down from the riser. The crowd parted for me again, but this time it wasn't out of confusion. It was out of something like respect, or maybe just fear. I walked past my mother, who was sobbing into her hands, not out of guilt, but out of shame. I walked past Jake, who couldn't even look at me. I walked straight through the center of the ruined party, my red dress flowing behind me, and headed for the exit. I had crashed the wedding, I had taken the slap, and I had burned their reputation to the ground. The truth was out, and it was louder than any band they could have hired. The silence outside the tent was heavy, a stark contrast to the murmur of shock I had left behind. I walked until I reached the low stone wall that lined the valet loop, my legs finally giving out. The adrenaline that had carried me through the speech, the confrontation, and the walk of shame, or rather the walk of truth, evaporated all at once, leaving me shaking. I sat down on the cold stone, pulling my knees together. My face was throbbing, a deep, rhythmic pulse in my cheek where my father's hand had connected. I touched the skin tentatively. It was hot and already beginning to swell. A young valet attendant, a kid who couldn't have been older than 19, approached me cautiously. He held out a plastic bag filled with ice from the bar. Ma'am, he whispered, looking terrified that I might explode. The manager sent this out. For your face. Thank you, I said, my voice sounding hollow in the open air. I pressed the bag against my cheek. The cold was shocking, but it grounded me. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, listening to the distant muffled sounds of a party dismantling itself. The music hadn't restarted. Instead, I heard the distinct sounds of chairs scraping, cars starting up, and the low hum of people leaving early. Then I heard footsteps on the gravel. Not the heavy, angry stomp of my father, but the clicking of heels. I looked up to see Lily. She was holding the skirt of her massive architectural gown in her hands to keep it off the dirt. Her face was streaked with mascara, and she looked less like a bride and more like a survivor of a natural disaster. She stopped a few feet away from me. She didn't look angry. She looked horrified. Rachel, she said. Her voice cracked. I didn't do it to hurt you, Lily, I said quietly. I know that sounds insane considering I just nuked your wedding reception, but I couldn't let them keep lying. Lily shook her head, looking back toward the tent where the lights were still twinkling mockingly. I didn't know. You have to believe me. Jake didn't. He never told me exactly where the money came from. He just said your parents were handling it. He said they wanted to do this for us. She let out a jagged laugh. I feel sick. I'm wearing a dress that cost more than your surgery. It's a nice dress. I offered, a dark humor surfacing. I can't go back in there, she admitted, sitting down on the wall next to me, oblivious to the dirt on her white silk. I can't look at them. Your dad, the way he hit you, and then tried to act like you were the crazy one. That's the Wilson way, I said. Appearance over everything, until the cracks show. We sat in silence for a moment, the bride and the exile united by the wreckage. Inside the narrative, war was being lost. I could hear snippets of conversation as guests walked to their cars, their voices carrying in the crisp night air. Did you see his face? He lost it. Stealing from a trust fund, that's federal, isn't it? I don't care what she said, you don't hit your kid. My parents were trying to spin it, I knew they were. Inside that tent, Mom was likely dabbing her eyes, telling anyone who would listen that I had been off my meds, that I had always been jealous of Jake, that I was prone to hallucinations. But you can't gaslight a room full of people who just watched a father slap his grown daughter across the face for speaking. The violence had shattered their credibility. The Rachel is dramatic smokescreen had finally lifted, revealing the machinery behind it. Rachel. This time the voice was deeper. I turned to see Jake standing at the edge of the light. He looked stripped down, jacket off, tie loosened, the golden aura gone. He looked like a tired man who had just realized his foundation was made of sand. Lily stood up and moved away slightly, giving us space, but she didn't go to him. That spoke volumes. Jake walked over, his hands in his pockets. He couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the gravel. Is it broken, your face? No, thanks to Dad, I said. But I'll survive. I always do. I really didn't know, Jake said, his voice thick. I mean, I knew they were helping. I knew they dipped into savings, but I didn't ask which account. I didn't want to know, I guess. It was easier to just let them handle it. That's the luxury you've always had, Jake, I said, not unkindly. You never had to ask where the money came from because it was always there for you. You never had to worry about the cost because you were the investment. I was the expense. I'm sorry, he whispered. And for the first time in his life, I think he actually meant it. He looked up at me, eyes red. I'm so sorry, Rach. I stood there and let them do it. I drove the truck. I took the coaching classes. I drank the champagne. I never begrudged you your happiness, Jake, I told him, pressing the ice pack harder against my cheek. I wanted you to have the great life. I just begrudged them using my life raft to buy it for you. He nodded, swallowing hard. What happens now? Now. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier. Now I go home, and on Monday I finish what I started. I didn't hug him. That bridge wasn't rebuilt yet. Maybe it never would be. I walked past him, signaled my rideshare, which had just pulled into the loop, and got in. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the Chateau de Lumière. I looked forward into the dark, quiet road. The next 72 hours were a blur of anxiety and vindication. I expected silence or hate mail. What I got was a deluge. It started with my Aunt Sarah. She texted me before I even made it back to my apartment that night. I saw what happened. I'm so proud of you. If you need a place to stay, the guest room is yours. Don't go back to them. Then came the cousins. Mike sent a long message apologizing for not seeing the truth sooner. Even a few of my dad's business partners, people I hadn't spoken to in years, reached out on LinkedIn or via email expressing concern and offering support. It turned out that watching a man strike his daughter publicly didn't poll well with the Chamber of Commerce crowd. But the real backbone was my friends. My phone blew up with messages from my small circle, the people who had actually been there when I was broke, when I was recovering, when I was hopeless. My best friend Chloe came over the next morning with bagels and an ice pack for my face, which had bloomed into a nasty purple bruise. You're a legend, she said, examining the mark. A terrified, traumatized legend. But you did it. I blew up my family, Chloe, I said, staring at my coffee. No, she corrected me, sitting down and taking my hand. They blew up the family. You just stopped helping them hide the debris. She was right. The isolation I had feared, the idea that I would be cast out into the wilderness, didn't happen. Instead, I found that the wilderness was full of people who believed me. The community I had built for myself, the one based on choice rather than blood, rallied around me like a shield wall. I realized then that I wasn't the orphan of the story. My parents were. They were the ones left in that empty house with nothing but their lies and their rapidly depreciating reputation. By Tuesday morning, the emotional hangover had faded into cold resolve. I put on a blazer, thrifted but sharp, and drove back to the lawyer's office. When I walked in, the dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the hesitant girl asking if she had a case. I was the plaintiff. I sat down and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were the new photos of my bruised face, screenshots of the text messages from family members confirming the events at the wedding, and a timeline I had written out at 3:00 a.m. The lawyer, Ms. Vance, looked through the new evidence. She paused at the photo of my cheek. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. "This changes the leverage," she said calmly. "The assault in front of witnesses adds a layer of malice that will make a judge very unsympathetic to their family unity defense. It also opens them up to criminal charges if you chose to pursue that." "I just want the money back," I said. "I want the trust restored. I want my future back." "We can do that," she said. "We file for breach of fiduciary duty conversion, and we petition for an immediate accounting and removal of trustees. Given the evidence of the wedding expenditures, which clearly do not benefit the beneficiary, it's a slam dunk. We will ask for full restitution plus legal fees." She looked at me over her glasses. "But you know what this means, Rachel. Once I file this, there is no going back to Sunday dinners. This is the end of the relationship." I thought about the text my mother had sent me the morning after the wedding. No apology. Just, "How could you do this to us after everything we've done?" They still didn't get it. They never would. They thought they owned me. "The relationship ended 8 years ago," I said, my voice steady. "I just finally signed the paperwork." "All right," Ms. Vance said, uncapping her pen. "Let's burn it down." I signed the retainer. My hand didn't shake. I walked out of the office into the bright afternoon sun. I was still broke. I was still in debt. I still had a bruise on my face that drew stares from strangers. But for the first time since I was 20 years old, I wasn't waiting for permission to live my life. I had taken the wheel back, and I was driving away from the wreck. It has been 7 months since the night I walked out of the Château de Lumière, with a bruised face and a lighter soul. I don't live in that cramped apartment with the lead-footed upstairs neighbor anymore. I moved into a duplex on the east side of town. It's not a mansion. The floors creak and the radiator clanks when it starts up, but it has a second bedroom that I've turned into a studio, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm not worried about making rent. My roommate is a graphic designer named Sarah, who pays on time and respects boundaries. It's quiet here. It's safe. The legal battle didn't drag on as long as Ms. Vance warned it might. As it turned out, my parents' desire to protect their reputation worked in my favor. Once we filed the complaint, and the threat of a public trial loomed, a trial where their friends and business associates could come and listen to testimony about embezzlement and assault, they folded. We reached a settlement out of court. They had to restore the trust. Every penny. To do it, they had to liquidate a significant portion of their assets. They sold the boat they never used. They cashed out Dad's 401k early. And in a twist of irony that feels almost scripted, they had to put the family home on the market. The house with the perfect lawn, the house where I grew up feeling like a ghost, is currently sitting on Zillow with a price-reduced banner. They downsized to a condo 2 towns over. They wanted to hoard their wealth and image so badly that they ended up losing both. I'm not a millionaire, but I have my future back. I paid off my student loans in one lump sum. That was the best day of my life, clicking submit payment and watching the balance hit zero. I found a therapist who specializes in family trauma, and I go every Thursday. We talk about the accident. We talk about the slap. We talk about the years of being told I was difficult for having needs. It's not magic. I didn't wake up one day completely healed. I still have nightmares about the crash. I still flinch when people raise their voices. But I'm building a foundation that is actually mine, not one made of quicksand. I haven't spoken to my parents since the wedding. They sent one letter a month after the settlement. It wasn't an apology. It was a 3-page diatribe about how I had destroyed the family and how they hoped the money kept me warm at night since I wouldn't have their love. I burned it in my kitchen sink. It felt ceremonial. I realized then that I wasn't grieving the loss of my parents. I was grieving the idea of them. I was grieving the people I wanted them to be, not the people they actually were. Jake is a work in progress. He and Lily are still married, but the fairy tale took a hit. Lily was furious when she found out the full extent of the financial lies. They are in couples counseling, and for the first time, Jake is paying his own way. He drives a used sedan now because he had to sell the truck to pay back his portion of the loans my parents had given him from my money. We meet for coffee once a month. It's awkward. There are long silences. But he's trying to unlearn 3 decades of being the golden child, and I'm trying to learn how to be a sister without being a doormat. Last week, he actually asked me how my photography class was going. He listened to the answer. It's a start. I think a lot about the values I was raised with. My father loved to speechify about the American dream, about hard work, family, and freedom. He used those words like weapons to keep me in line. But sitting here in my studio editing photos from a small freelance gig I picked up, I realize I'm the one actually living those values. I have resilience. I didn't let them turn me into the villain of their story. I took the hits literally and metaphorically, and I kept standing. I have community. Not the community of blood relatives who drain you dry, but the community of friends and extended family who showed up when the smoke cleared. And I have freedom. Real freedom. The kind that comes from knowing that everything I have, my apartment, my camera, my peace of mind belongs to me. No one can hold a check over my head. No one can threaten to cut me off. I am my own safety net. People ask me sometimes if I regret doing it. If I regret ruining the wedding. If I regret exposing them. They ask if it was worth the scars. I look at my bank account free of debt. I look at my calendar free of obligation to people who don't love me. I look at the mirror where the bruise has long since faded, leaving behind a woman who finally respects herself. They wanted a peaceful, drama-free wedding. They wanted a perfect picture for Instagram to prove to the world that they were good, successful parents. They wanted the lie to be the final word. What they got was the truth. And the truth is a funny thing. It doesn't care about your floral arrangements. It doesn't care about your reputation. And it certainly doesn't care how the pictures look. I'm not the difficult daughter anymore. I'm just Rachel. And for the first time, that is enough. Rachel finally found her peace, proving that sometimes the hardest battles are fought against the people who are supposed to protect us. If you found satisfaction in her journey of taking back control, please hit that subscribe button. We read every single comment of your thoughts, so let us know if you would have done the same. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.